I think we should start. So, hi everyone, I'm Ølnes, tribe lead at Signicat for signing and trust services, editor of the ETSI TS 119461 standard on identity proofing. So we'll bring you through we think a really exciting program for today's webinar. Firstly, practically, this is going to be recorded. It's going to be available on the Signicat website after the event. We hope we have plenty of time for questions and answers, but we'll do that at the end of the session. So please type your questions into the chat, which is available, and we'll pick them up at the end of the webinar. So we have a good lineup, as I said. We have firstly our next speaker, but I'll go through the program before we hand over. But we're honored to have Nick Pope, chairman of the ETSI Technical Committee ESI, the committee that makes all these standards that we rely upon for trust services and also to a large extent for the European digital identity wallets, to do call it a keynote to us. I will take over doing a brief presentation, not so much about the technicalities and the details of the standard, but why it's made and how we see it being taken up and used in different areas. And we'll have the hands-on by my colleagues Silvia, Lafuente, and Bob Hulsebosch. That will show you how this works in practice for remote identity proofing, with the two alternatives: optical scanning of an identity document and reading of the chip of an identity document for remote identity proofing. So without spending more time on the introduction, I'll hand it over to you, Nick, for some input on why is ETSI working on this stuff and what's ETSI doing in this area.
Thank you very much, John, for introducing me. Yeah, as chair, we've been working on standards supporting digital identities and signatures and trust services for over 25 years. And this is centered around the concept of accountability of either organizations, which are called legal persons, or individuals. So the whole aim of our work is to ensure that either people or organizations can be held accountable to what they're doing within the digital domain. And we're just starting a 3-year program of standards supporting the digital identity wallet. We've got a number of standards just coming up for approval at the end of this month, and have a further 2 years of testing and enhancing these standards. And we've worked closely with the user communities as well as providers, and have close links with organizations such as EBA on banking, and also work closely with international groups, clearly building on ISO standards, but also working closely with groups such as OpenID and the Cloud Signature Consortium. So why is identity important and identity improving important to us? Is our work centers around the linking of real world people or organizations to identities as represented in the digital domain. And this link is provided through identity proofing. So somehow you need to ensure that the real world person is the same as the person that's represented in the digital domain. And this is quite important, in becoming more and more important in the advances on cloud computing and AI, where the link between the real world person who can be held accountable in court and what's going on in the digital domain is becoming more and more difficult. So the work we've carried out, led by Jon, but involving a large number of 25 or more people. We have about 50 members, and a large proportion of those was involved with this work. And this activity is able to support a range of approaches, providing harmonized levels, so that whether you're using physical person in present or remote identification using biometrics, and whether you have it overseen by a person or is purely dependent on technology, all of these are covered in the framework, providing a framework which gives assurance levels to each of these approaches. And this standard is based around our framework for security. So we have a conformity assessment scheme, which is numbered EN 319403 Part 1, which has been operating successfully for over 5 years, is supporting the trust services, and this has been adapted to take account of the requirements of identity proofing, so you can use that standard. Also, the identity proofing is based on a background standard for cryptographic and cyber security, EN 319401, which provides a baseline for cyber security across all our standards. So the standard for 119461 has been adopted not just for EI-trust services, but is being recommended by CEN as a basis of identity proofing linked to identity cards or identity wallets in the digital domain. And we're also working closely, as I mentioned, with EBA, and they have adopted in their guidelines as one of the ways of doing remote know your customer checks, the use of 461. So I'd just like to quickly thank Jon and all my other colleagues. So Jon very modestly pointed out that it wasn't just him working on this. He was backed up by a large number of our members. And this is providing support for all our other standards which depend on identity. So it's becoming the cornerstone of linking physical persons and organizations in the digital domain and underpinning the digital economy with trust and accountability. Thanks very much.
So much, Nick. Let's see. Yeah, thank you so much, Nick. That's a good introduction. It puts the standard in the context, right? So we'll have a brief look at what this standard is about, not going into the technical details because we don't have time for that, but looking more at the overall perspective. Do you have my screen? So it's about the standard. The standard is a goal the way it's used. So the project is actually harmonizing identity proofing for Europe. That's the goal. And if you go back a couple of years, not that many years, the situation was like this in the 3 areas that Nick also mentioned. Like for issuing of qualified certificates for trust services, you could use other means recognized at national level to provide equivalent assurance to physical presence. So what happened? Well, some nations recognized ways of doing it, and they did it all differently, of course. But what more often happened is that there were no national rules, so you couldn't use remote identity proofing in countries because there were no national rules to refer to. Issuing of electronic identification means EID is the same, done at national level with identification done according to national rules. And if you look at financial services, we then had, let's say we go back to the AML directive version 5, remote of electronic identification process regulated, recognized, approved, or accepted by the relevant national authorities. So, in one short word, chaos. And we set out to try to do something about this. And if you want to harmonize on anything, if you want to harmonize something, you need something to harmonize on. And that's why a standard was needed. So we did the first work in ETSI, ending up in version 1.1.1 of this standard in July 2021. At that time, we had ETSI version 1, and for issuing of qualified certificates and the like, the sort of benchmark level was an EID substantial. So we created a standard covering a baseline level of identity proofing, sort of leveraging against an EID substantial level. Then came ETSI version 2. And one notable thing that happened with ETSI version 2 is that this level for getting a qualified certificate was raised to approximately to EID high. It refers EID high, and that means also all other means need to be leveraged sort of at the level of ETSI high, of EID high. And yeah, that led to a thorough revision of the standard. It was a process that, as Nick said, involved 25-ish different experts with different viewpoints. It's always standard is always a compromise, but we believe it's a good compromise, and we got the standard published in February. It has both of these versions have received good feedback, and I think they are useful and being used. So, what do we cover? Nick also briefly mentioned this, but we have the following use cases where we put requirements on how to do them. Physical presence. Yeah, ETSI version 1 was stating just you can do identity proofing by physical presence or something equivalent to physical presence. But I mean, physical presence could be from a passport office to a bank branch to a shop to anything. So there was obviously a need to set basic requirements on how to do physical presence using an identity document. Attended remote, this is where the applicant is in an online session but talks to someone in the other end using the identity document. So you could call it physical presence at a distance. You have the unattended remote, also using the identity document remotely. This is where the session the user is in is automated. So you sort of speak to a system and not to a person in the other end. But the evaluation of what happens in that session, the evidence gathered in that session, the use of that one can be automated, or it can be by someone manually doing the evaluation, or a combination of them. You can use an EID for authentication to get the identity proofing done if the person already has an EID. So Signicat does that extensively. We have an identity hub integrating like 35 different EIDs across Europe, and many of these can be used, of course, also in an identity proofing context. The other last one is, let's say this person already has a qualified or other type of signature. Well, the identity from the certificate of such a signature can, of course, also be used to prove identity. And we cover the natural person, legal person, and the natural person representing a legal person. So the standard says you need an authoritative evidence that this is the real person is present, an evidence that shows that, yeah, it's the person identified by this evidence is the one using it. So that could be a digital identity document read from the chip of a document. It could be a physical identity document, effectively an optical scan of it. If you do it remotely, that is, you can of course also use it for physical presence, EID, or a certificate of a digital signature. But that's not enough, because you use other sources depending on what's available in different member states. You could use a trusted register, like we do in the Nordics, for example. If you do an identity proofing, you will always do a lookup in the national population register to get fresh information about the attributes of the user. You can use documents and attestations, which includes EDAS version 2 electronic attestation of attributes, mediated through the wallet or by another way. And you can have a proof of access. For example, you can prove access to a bank account and you can get identity information that way. Summing this up, you have an authoritative evidence, but you also have an authoritative source of identity attributes, which could be, for example, your trusted register. So you do the proof of the identity by an identity document and use the identity provided by that document to look up in a population register, and you get fresh updated information that way, which could overrule the identity of the identity document. So things like that, different ways of doing it. The standard is specifically written to work in various environments depending on what is available in the country in question. So we provide it as a baseline standard for ETSI, for onboarding to trust services, for European Banking Authority to remote customer onboarding, and for SEN to onboarding to European digital identity wallets. So let's have a look at this. For trust services, EDAS version 2 has a pointer to an implementing regulation on identity verification. That implementing regulation has been published just recently, July, as you can see. And it says in the annex, the standard ETSI TS 119461 applies with the following adaptations, and then they make some extra requirements. And the regulation shall apply from August 2027. So what this means is it's stronger than the usual implementing act stating presumption of compliance. It actually states that this is the way to do it if you want to issue a qualified certificate or a qualified attestation of attributes. So the standard becomes mandatory, actually, with the extra requirements in the annex. In the annex, yeah, it's the only way to do it. And apply from 2027 means actors get 2 years to adjust. So we are there for harmonized identity proofing for trust services. What about the wallet? The SEN standard on guidelines for the onboarding of user personal identification within wallets is in its final draft version. What it says is for identity verification, requirements defined in the ETSI standard shall be fulfilled. And they make one essential adaptation. And they say that, but you require to use the chip in the document. Means digital identity document in the terminology of the ETSI standard. And it also states that the binding, the evaluation that it's the right face of the applicant compared to the face you get from reading the chip, the face photo. The evaluation shall be done by both manual and biometric comparison. So there is a manual step, and the way this standard states it, and if this gets adopted with the Commission, you can't do fully automated onboarding to the European Digital Identity Wallet. This has raised concerns and is still being discussed, right? We'll see what this ends up like, but that's the status for the time being. European Banking Authority sets guidelines, single set of rules for banking institutions. They don't overrule national law, but Supervisory authorities and financial institutions must make every effort to comply. If you don't comply, you must give a compelling reasons why you don't comply to a guideline. The guidelines on the remote customer onboarding solution states, in respect of guideline something, the EBA agreed to align the draft with ETSI standards where possible and updated the guidelines accordingly. Actually, they are very well aligned with the first version, the previous version, the 111 of the ETSI standard, and the baseline level, that was then the only one applicable. And what happens with the AML regulation? Well, what happens is that they point at ADA's electronic identity at substantial level, and they point at the EBA guidelines on remote onboarding, that identity proofing should be according to these guidelines. So what it looks like, not finally decided, is that these guidelines will provide the basis also for the identity proofing, also for the AML regulation. And that means also the ETSI standard applies in this case. What we see is that actors have been audited against ETSI to prove that they comply with the EBA guidelines. This is how we like it to be, right? This is how we want it to be across these three areas. So that's why we made the standard, a little bit about what's in the standard and how it contributes to the harmonization of identity proofing in Europe. So yeah, we don't just follow the standards, we help shape them, as we say. So by that, I think it's time to see how it works. Maybe that's more interesting than just looking at my PowerPoint slides. So I hand it over to my colleague Silvia. So yeah.
Thanks, John. Hello, everybody. Yes, I am. I'm the leader of the identity proofing tribe here at Signicat, and I want to show you how we actually make the standard real. We've just heard why Europe is moving toward harmonized identity proofing and how this ETSI fits into the bigger picture and why this is standard. So now let's make it practical and see what does implementing ETSI-compliant identity proofing look like. Just a sec. ETSI defines the identity proofing process in a very structured way. Collect the evidence, validate it, bind it to the applicant, and issue an auditable result. These building blocks can be combined into different use cases. John also mentioned that: physical presence, remote attended, remote and attended, and they can be manual, hybrid, or fully automated. Signicat, what I'd like you to do now is show you how these requirements look in practice, focusing on remote and attended in the hybrid mode or fully automated mode. When it comes to the document authenticity, the first requirement is document authenticity. ETSI requires that the evidence is authoritative, valid, and securely captured. And the ETSI makes a very clear point here. It says a simple aesthetic photo of a document is not sufficient. And why is this? Because a single image doesn't prove the document was actually presented by the applicant in real time without manipulation. An imposter could upload a photo of someone else's ID. So that's why the standard requires three things of the document authenticity phase. Attribute collection, pretty straightforward. We need to gather the attributes. Document security, ensuring the document is genuine and unaltered. And the third one, evidence of authenticity of the capture. And how VideoID supports this. Let me show you the previous recording because of privacy reasons. I did this a couple of days ago, and this is how the identity proofing of video ID looks like. Sorry, I didn't want this to take very long, but not so fast. So a lot of things are happening here in the background, but I'll tell you about this a little bit later. So with video ID, the process is video-based. We saw that. Document is captured live in a recorded session. And during this capture, video ID performs multiple checks, extracting attributes at the same time that we show front and back, attributes both from the machine readable zone and the visual inspection zone, validating security features like holograms, background patterns, chips, signatures, how coherent the information from both MRC and VIC is, and ensures the integrity of the capture. And then we go to the next step, which is biometrics and liveness. Once we've captured and validated the document, the next big question is, how do we know the applicant is really the legitimate holder of that document and not just someone who has stolen or copied it? So this is what ETSI calls the binding to the applicant. The standard requires that we reliably link the authoritative evidence, this is the ID card or the passport, to the person presenting it. And the ETSI defines several requirements here. Face capture, pretty straightforward. Process must capture a high-quality facial image. And this image will become the biometric anchor used to bind the document's attributes to the person. Next is automated face biometrics. You need to make that face matching in an automated way, even though there could be an agent also supervising that. And the third one is security, is liveness check, presentation attack detection, and injection attack detection. And the ETSI actually gives several standards to serve as guidelines to achieve all this. So how video ID supports this? Let me go back to our recording. During the live session, video ID captures the applicant face, performs automated biometric comparisons, includes all the integrates all the liveness detection, pad mechanisms, IID, injection attack detection mechanism, and continuous recording. That's it. So this is it. This is all it takes from the user. Now we need to go back to the 4 pillars because the process is not over. Supervision. Now, if you're aiming for an extended level of identity proofing, then this has traditionally required human involvement. With video ID, this is built in. A registration officer supervises the session and confirms both document and biometric checks, exactly as the ETSI describes for remote attended use cases. I will show you briefly also how the agent works. And here, this is may require a little bit of, because this is the dashboard of the agent. Starts working, pressing play, a new verification arrives, so he needs to work. And this is the interface. Everything is very tight. The reason for this is because they need to do this what takes more is probably to correct the ETSI we will see that later. Also, it's important, let me stop here. These security elements, these are all the AI models and machine learning models that were executed in the backend while we were doing the video, and the result of those, as well as other image checks. The agent needs to look at all this and see that they are actually okay. And this is all automated. I mean, if there is a detection of a living person, it's because a model made the checks to actually see that the person was smiling when we asked the person to smile, and there was no mask. They weren't wearing a mask, or they weren't showing just a person in a screen. These are, let me go. These are the security questions. The agent needs to respond to all of them in order to process. The agent has many tools here to help them take the best picture, or actually compare this with the specimen. I mean, all that it's required so that they make a proper assessment. But actually, this shouldn't take very long. As a matter of fact, it takes very short time, because most of the verifications are legit, for one thing, and because, I mean, this is something that we want to be agile. So once supervision is finished, we have the evidence package, because remember that we said that the identity proofing process doesn't end when the applicant is verified. It must produce a full evidence package that completely document what happened. So we need, the package needs to include the raw captures, photos, videos, and session, the traces of the agent's actions, the results of the security checks, and the binding decisions. So how Signicat supports this? Well, we make a preservation package with all the evidence. How is this collected? Well, we have a transaction dashboard where we can download all the evidence. This is, for an example of my own process. These are timestamped. They are sealed with a qualified timestamp that it also can be downloaded. There are bindings to the verifier and the registration authority that did this process. And as for the metadata related to the process, we have evidence collected from the video edit process, no agent involved, the results of the security checks. I extended this one, for example, the status that they had when it ended. Also the result of the biometrics, the automated part, the similarity level, if they were wearing hats, glasses, or masks. I mean, all the detail is there. And of course, the evidence package that concerns to the verification, the acceptance reasons, what the agent actually checked yes, and of course the status of the verification. So that's how we finish the process. And we've seen how this ETSI compliant identity proofing looks in a supervised flow with video ID, document validation, biometric binding, liveness check, agent supervision when required, full preservation package. The standard also recognizes automatic processes if the document is presented is digital. And this is achieved through NFC reading of digital identity documents. And that's exactly what our Read ID solution is built for. So I won't go deeper into that here, and Bob, please, will walk you through the fully automated use case and how Read ID supports this.
Jumping in from the sideline, we are so happy to welcome our new addition to the Signicat family, Inverid, and their Read ID product. So you just recently joined the Signicat family of companies. We're very happy to have you here. So over to you, Bob. Show what you have.
Yes, thank you very much, John. So we are also very happy to be the new member of the Signicat family. I'm the compliance officer at Signicat, or Inverid Read ID. So I have to make sure that we comply with all kinds of regulations and specifications, such as the ETSI 119461. Read ID provides identity and identity document verification services for numerous EIDAS, trust service providers, and financial institutions. So we do this by reading the chip of identity documents, such as passports or identity cards, via mobile app, and by using NFC near field communication technology. And basically, we verify a number of things. We read the personal data from the chip of an identity document, and we verify the authenticity of the data. This is a cryptographic check against a trusted list of issuing authorities, so the member states, the countries that issue the identity documents. So it's true or false. We also verify if the chip is authentic and not a clone or a copy by challenging it with a challenge and by checking the response. This way, we are also protected against injection and replay attacks. And finally, to verify it is really you holding the identity document, we compare the face image read from the chip with a selfie picture taken with your mobile phone. And we do a check for liveness. We don't do this ourselves. We make use of a biometrics identity verification partner for this. So the end results are shared with the customer, and they contain identity data and the verification outcomes. And by doing identity proving like this, we fulfill a lot of tasks and underlying requirements, such as specified in the ETSI 119461 for remote and unattended use cases. Hence, Signicat Read ID is ETSI 119461 compliant and certified as part of our EIDAS certification package. So maybe it's good now to show a demo of how Read ID works. Do you now see my screen with the Read ID application?
Yes, we do.
I'm assuming that's, yes, thank you, John. So here you see the Read ID mobile app. And then I will start identity proofing myself with the app. So here I have the option of selecting an identity document, a passport, an identity card, or a driving license. In the Netherlands, a driving license is also an official identity document. In this case, I will select an identity card. So then I have to scan the machine readable zone of the identity card. And that's at the back of the card. So I have an identity card here and I scan the machine readable zone. So that gives me access to the chip contents. So here you see an image of the zone and then I can click next. And then I have to scan the chip by holding the identity document at the back of my mobile phone. There's some animations, and the animations guide the customer, the end user, through the whole identity proofing flow. And these animations are customized for the type of document that the end user is using and the mobile phone he or she is using. So then I will put my identity card at the back of my mobile phone, and now the chip reading process starts. And it reads all the personal data that's in the chip, including the face image. So that's done. And here you can see the outcomes of the chip reading. So here you see the face image, the checks that we do. So the content read is authentic. The chip has also been challenged and the response is okay. So it's authentic as well. And the document is not expired. I can go a little bit into more detail, the checks that we do. So we do active authentication, basic access control, extended active authentication, and so on. And all these checks are being communicated with the customer at the end of the identity proofing session. The next step would be to do an identity document holder verification flow. So here we make use of a biometrics optical verification provider. And that optical verification provider compares the face image read from the chip with the face image I record during a selfie video on my mobile phone. And if that is okay, then that will be shared with the customer. So if I stop sharing, so if I now go back to the video session. Yes, here I'm back again. So that's basically what we do. And by doing identity proofing like this, we fulfill a lot of tasks and underlying requirements that are specified in ETSI. And I think ETSI is 461 is currently one of the most comprehensive and up-to-date identity proofing standards. So if I would have the legal obligation to properly identify my end users, I would opt to become ETSI 461 compliant as well. And it's the most easy way to convince supervisory authorities and auditors that your know your customer processes are conform industry best practices and standards and at the highest level. So that's me for explaining and demonstrating REIT-ID.
Super. Thanks a lot, Silvia and Rob. We got a couple of questions here, and actually the first one I could loop right back at you, Bob. How does the software used for NFC get onto the customer's phone? How do you read? How do you get software to read the chip actually?
Yeah, so we have two options. So either the client, the customer can make use of our white label REIT-ID Ready app. So if the customer doesn't have an app itself, it can make use of that app and it can customize it a little bit. It can put some logos and a color scheme of the company to the app. A second option is to integrate our SDK, software development kit, in the customer's application itself. So that's the preferred solution for most of our customers. So they have their mobile app and they can integrate our SDK into their own app, and then they can start doing NFC reading or REIT-ID. The processing we do is server side. So we do the processing of all the verifications in the cloud at AWS or European cloud provider for security reasons. So it's much more secure compared to doing it at the mobile client.
Thanks. You want to add anything, Silvia? It's about the same for your services, except you have the advantage with the optical scanning that you can do it also from a web interface, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's basically the same. The web interface, it's always, well, the access to the hardware of the device is not that ready because you are going, it's a little bit technical, but you go to the mobile through the web browser application. So we always recommend native SDKs, but the solution is fully compliant and also ready for web.
Thank you, Silvia. I have another one that you might comment upon. We have participation from Azerbaijan. Welcome. Question, what about a photo with a hat or a hijab, for example, or something like that? We know some countries restrict this for identity documents, but maybe what's the attitude in settings like this?
Well, we had to pay attention to that kind of issues because our solution is in a production environment in France, and the requirements from the customer was to detect hats and hijabs and also masks and all that, and they wanted to know if the user was wearing that, because if it could make more difficult the binding, and the binding needs to be possible. If the picture includes the face of the person, you need to be able to make the comparison.
Thank you. I got one for you, Nick, that I think you can explain well. And question about, is this just European? Is there an uptake of the ETSI standards outside of Europe? And just to hook in, ETSI is actually planning to turn this standard into a European norm, an EN norm level next year. That's at least in our plan, likely to be approved. But what about internationalization of ETSI standards, Nick?
Okay. Yeah, we do work a lot with international groups. We've got very strong links of Japan and a number of members in the US. As you said, currently our work is centered around Europe, that we're making sure that we meet the latest European regulations. But based on other areas, it's likely that other countries might start adopting our work, and it's quite common that other countries, particularly in South America and the ISMEA region, which often work with Europe, they have a background of adopting ETSI standards. So there's no immediate standard plan, because we're very much concentrating on the European requirements and moving towards a European norm. But it all depends on external interests, and I expect that identity proofing is going to be one of the key issues with all our partners and trading. So I think it's going to be quite important.
Thank you, Nick. We have a couple of questions regarding relationship to Nordic EIDs, Nordic Identification Means. I think I can try to answer that one. How will it affect Swedish bank, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Finland, right? And there are different ways. Firstly is you should largely be able to issue these EIDs from documents remotely, so you can onboard for the first time to an EID. If you look to Norway, the Bank ID app has had this technology with NFC reading built in from the start, actually Read ID. But they're not allowed to use it because the legal rules aren't there yet, but that's changing. If that's allowed by Norwegian rules, pointing to the standard, then that will be doable. One use case of the standard is, of course, use of the EIDs and an authentication procedure for identity proofing. So the EIDs will have a role as in identity proofing for other services, for example, onboarding to banks. And well, to be honest, following up on that, several of the Nordic EIDs have restrictions on that use. So you can't use a Swedish bank ID to issue another EID. So you can use then remote identity proofing the way we've seen in this session to get around those ID switching barriers. So you can onboard your users using an identity document instead of using the EID if the EID prohibits that use. So I think that's the main thing we have on that one. Question to Bob again. Have you considered integration of lost stolen document check?
Yes, we have considered it. Basically, that's a national challenge. So at the moment, the customer has to connect to the lost and stolen databases themselves, locally, let's say, in their own countries. We are currently also looking at revocation checking. So there's a couple of solutions for that. So that's the Interpol iCheckIt solution or the ICAO public key directory. But these solutions are not quite optimal. So we are now working on the implementation of our own solution that checks for all the countries that publish revoked documents at their public sites, more or less, to check if the document that we scan hasn't been revoked. And if that's the case, that will be communicated to the customer.
Thank you. We got two questions or a couple of questions regarding the biometrics here. I think I'll hand them over to you, Silvia. The first one is referring to industry best practices regarding presentation attack detection, and what is this, and how do you measure that? And from the standard side, one thing we do is we don't, and the other one is on face matching, the percentage accepted, like false acceptance, false rejection rate. The first thing from the editor's point of view is we don't put specific values into the standard, because that would be outdated soonish. So we try to make more general requirements in this case. But I don't know if you have any comments on PAD and face matching, Silvia.
Yes. Well, the standard makes it clear that if you want to go for an fully automated case, you need to be compliant with certain norms and regulations that are also included in the standard, like when it comes to the presentation attack detection, ETSI standard mentions ISO 30,000, and for the injection attack detection, the ETSI TS 1899. So, and those, we are coming from a scenario where the standard was not mandatory, and the second version is pretends to harmonize. But in this interim, Signicat registered as QTSP in Spain, and the local supervisor had its own regulation, and we had to get ready for the Spanish regulation. And the technical instruction of the Spanish regulation, I can tell you, because I read both, it's very well inspired in those European standards. So we know what we have to do, and a lab will need to check that. But the rules are there.
Yes, I'll do the next one. If a European bank today only asks for a photo upload of the EID and a selfie for the ID verification, well, they wouldn't be compliant. They're not compliant with the EBI guidelines for remote onboarding, requiring video and a selfie video as well. So they should change. What types of IDs can be used? We have some questions that I will try to answer there. If you handle identity document, what types of identity documents can be handled? Well, documents that are sufficiently secured. If you do chip reading, obviously you can only handle document that has a chip, that have a chip inside them, right? For the document scanning, there's a lot of machine learning, and there's a lot of things going on in the background, as Silvia said. So what can reliably be handled? It depends also on the quality of the identity document from the country. But in principle, passports from all countries can be handled in such a case. Related to that, there's a question. Let's say you are in Finland and someone from Switzerland occurs with a Swiss passport or identity card, and you need to prove that this is the same person that has also a Finnish identity. And this is hard, because there's no European and no EU identity defined. As a connection with the wallet, there will be rules on identity matching between countries. But it's not easy. It's not easy to show, in this case, that the Swiss person is the same as this Finnish identity, that Swiss and the Finnish identity are the same person. So anyway, it's outside of the standard. What you do from these systems, you just provide the proven identity, and then it's up to the application how to use it, to put it shortly. There was one question for clarification on what in the standard is called binding to applicant. That means how you link the physical person to the evidence provided. So this can be purely manual by the remote identity proofing. You have a video including photos of the identity document. You have a video of the face, including face photos. And then you do the comparison only manual. That's allowed, but it can only reach the baseline level of identity proofing. Compare substantial EID, not the high level. You can do it fully automated, which is what Bob demonstrated. You do this by biometrics, and you get a reliable result. You can do it when you get the photo from the chip of the identity document, because there you have a higher resolution on the reference photo. And you can do it hybrid, which is what Silvia's team in Spain does, using both a human eye on the process, but also using biometrics and automated. So all these are available according to the standard. Where are we? We are approaching, let's see if we have some new ones. I have one more that I can look at. Use of integration platforms for integrating different identity proofing methods into one platform and providing them to customers. Well, this is what Signicat does or will do in the near future. So we are preparing our identity hub, including audit and certification, to be able to provide identity from all the EIDs we have, 35 different EIDs, and from read ID, from video ID, and from other identity proofing methods for that sake, into the hub and funneling that identity onto our customers, for example, for issuing a qualified certificate for qualified signing. And then we, of course, need to filter, because of the EIDs we integrate, only some of them are on notified high and capable for issuing a qualified certificate. So, but that's absolutely a way we are thinking, and I know other actors out there are thinking in the same way. Yes, so we are on the time, 12, and I think there is one more comment on the SEN standard that, the issue of the hybrid mode for onboarding to the EU wallet, and what is not being considered by SEN here is, of course, the cost and user friendliness of requiring a team of agents to look at the identity proofing when you use an identity document. So the cost benefit of not allowing the fully automated case in this case is questionable, but let's see how this pans out in the end. And that's it. I hope you had a good time. I hope we made something clearer to you, that we demonstrated not only Signicat capabilities, but also how this fits in harmonizing identity proofing in Europe. And the work goes on, so please support as good as you can, and let's make that harmonization happen. Thank you all.